everyone grab something to eat if you wanted it. Feel free to get up, help yourselves. There's water, there's chips. Many thanks to Willow Tree for the delicious sandwiches. All right, well, we have a really exciting program for you tonight, so I cannot wait to get started. If you need anything, though, just quick housekeeping, please make sure your cell phones are on silent. We haven't had to say that in a long time because we're usually virtual, but please turn your phones off. We are live streaming this tonight, so the backs of most of you will be on TV, but we will be on TV on DoubleACS, so thanks so much to DoubleACS for that. And we are obviously at the library. They do have other programs, so you may see folks in and out and around. We will let them know what we're doing if they don't want to be in here. And the restrooms are right in the hallway if anyone needs anything. So if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I just want to say hello and welcome. I am Amanda Blunt. I'm the Executive Director of the Literacy Center in Attleboro. We are a nonprofit organization. Most of you may know us, but in case you don't, we are the largest provider of adult education services in the area. Last year, we served about 800 individuals from over 50 countries. We are also the primary service provider for immigrants and refugees in our region, so we work very closely with people from all over the world, helping them get the services that they need when they arrive in the country. We work very closely with the organizations represented here tonight as well. We really do pride ourselves on being a very welcoming place, and to that end, this event is no different. This is an event where we hope to learn a lot, but it is not going to be a forum for debate tonight, so in case you disagree with anything being said, I would love to talk to you about it, but not tonight. So before we get started on the panel discussion, I would like to invite Attleboro's Mayor, Cathleen DeSimone, to give a few welcoming remarks before she hurries off to City Council to continue doing her job well after her hours.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Attleboro. Welcome to the Attleboro Public Library, which to me is an extremely important place, not only because it's the center of our community, but to me a library is in fact the center of our democracy, because it involves the exchange of communication, information, and learning between people of all types. And I am always and completely a library fan and happy to be here. And forgive the mask, COVID just went around my house again, so apologies for that. Thank you, Amanda, for inviting me, and thank you for the Literacy Center for all your good work. I've done many things in my life. I've worked on the back of a garbage truck. I'm now serving as mayor. But in between those stints, I was an immigration attorney for the United States Immigration Service. When I graduated law school, it was the first job that I got. And I was very proud. I didn't know it at the time, but I was working for Mr. Reardon for some time. I was very proud to represent the United States government pretty much daily in immigration court. I learned a lot. And some of the things I learned were hard, and some were very good. I learned that sometimes the law can seem arbitrary and unfair, but it's important nonetheless. And that was my job, to uphold the law. But I also learned to feel for those folks who literally sat maybe no more than 4 feet away from me, or often unrepresented individuals in court pro se, whose native language was not English, and did the best that they could to tell their stories to the judge so that they could remain in the United States. I left after 4 years, and I jumped to the other side. I went to private practice as an immigration attorney myself, and I worked to help people maintain and obtain their lawful permanent residence in the United States, to help them gain their citizenship, and sometimes go back to the immigration court and help them resolve whatever immigration issues they had. Equally rewarding work, equally important. I was also involved teaching ESOL to non-native English speakers at the Literacy Center. So in brief, I've pretty much been on all sides of the issues. And not much has changed in the 20 or so years that I've been working in the immigration field. It's as schizophrenic, as unpredictable, as harsh, as unfair as it has been. And I don't know what the answer is. However, I don't think the answer is going to be found in social media posts and Facebook chats about fences and walls and all that other stuff about changing the laws and this and that. To me, at the end of the day, wherever we wind up, the best way to get there is by listening to each other. Listening to your neighbors, to the folks who are not from here but came here because they want a better life. And I guarantee you, if you had kids, you'd do the same thing. So treat people with mercy, be kind, be fair. I do respect the law. However, I also believe in justice and fairness. But I'm glad that you came tonight, and I hope that you all came to listen and learn. These are not easy issues. So thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you, everyone.
Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming down. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm still practicing calling Kathleen Mayor because she's been a friend for a long time and a colleague, but I love calling you Mayor. All right, so we can really get started now with the fun of it all. Tonight's panel discussion is both important and timely, as Massachusetts is experiencing a migrant crisis of unprecedented proportions. As many of you may know, on August 8th, Governor Healy declared a state of emergency in the state of Massachusetts due to the influx of migrants in the state. There are over 20,000 people residing in emergency shelters across our state right now. Predominantly, these are pregnant women and women with small children. Massachusetts is the only right-to-shelter state in the country, and therefore anyone coming into the state that is pregnant or has children is legally allowed to have shelter, and that is also why we have a shelter crisis going on. Right now, about 30 to 40 new families are being placed in shelters every day. This crisis is the result of numerous violent conflicts around the world, and it is by no means a Massachusetts problem. It is very much a global problem. It is something that is being caused by climate change. It is something that is being caused by violence. It is something being caused by political conflicts around the world. This crisis is also because people are being driven away from their homes and they are fleeing for their lives and for the lives of their children. Tonight, we are welcoming experts on this topic of immigration to talk to us about this situation and to help us all better understand the immigration process so that we can be informed when we choose to vote, when we choose to make decisions, when we choose to help people, to volunteer, to donate. We want to know exactly what it is that we are supporting. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I have this in the wrong order on my notes here, but James over here is the staff attorney. James Richardson is a staff attorney from Project Citizenship. This is an organization that focuses on helping folks become U.S. citizens. He joined Project Citizenship in the summer of 2021 as an AmeriCorps legal advocate of Massachusetts, and he's remained on staff since the completion of his service year. James graduated from Suffolk University Law School, where he worked in Suffolk's housing clinic. Today, James's work focuses primarily on naturalization interviews, specifically those requiring medical waivers. The Literacy Center partners very closely with Project Citizenship, and we have for a long time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end if we have some time. Next to James, we have Meagan Hecht, who I've had the great pleasure of getting to know over the past few years, as she's been so supportive of the work and students at the Literacy Center. Meagan is an immigration attorney at the Justice Center of Southeast Massachusetts, which provides legal services to indigent clients living in Southeast Mass. Meagan and her team represent foreign nationals in primarily humanitarian-based immigration cases, both before the Immigration Court and before U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Meagan has also done immigration work with Greater Boston Legal Services and the Immigration Impact Unit of the Massachusetts Committee for Public Counsel Services. Thanks for being here, Meagan. Next to Meagan, we have John McCarthy. John is a communications relations specialist at the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS. John has his MS in criminal justice from Northeastern University and a BA in English literature from St. Michael's College. He served 2 years active duty in the U.S. Army and 30-plus years service in law enforcement. Upon serving 22 years as the chief of police in Tisbury, Mass., he retired from local enforcement and served 2 years as a police advisor with UNMIK, the United Nations mission in Kosovo. There he advised the Kosovo Police Service and worked alongside police services from 39 other nations to support development and professionalization of the Kosovo Police Service. Upon return to the U.S., he came to work for USCIS, where he began as an adjudications officer deciding benefit applications. He is now the Community Relations Specialist under the USCIS External Affairs Directorate for the Northeastern U.S. He covers the coastal states of Maine through Connecticut, Upper New York State, and Vermont. He has been with USCIS for the past 16 years and working in community relations for the past 8 years. Thank you so much for being here, John. And finally, we have Dennis Reardon. Dennis, remind me your title. I'm sorry, I didn't.
District Director.
District Director of USCIS in Boston, excuse me. Dennis started his career in 1978 in Detroit as an immigration inspector and then was an immigration examiner in 1983. He was then selected to be the agency's first senior immigration examiner and asylum officer in Baltimore. After that, Dennis worked in embassies in Ireland and London and in Rome. Dennis has been at the Boston USCIS office since 1998. Dennis graduated from the University of Detroit, and he has 5 children and soon to be 7 grandchildren with his wife Mary, who is also a retired officer from USCIS. I hope I did that right. I got
Very
Dennis's
well.
bio a little bit later. I'm so happy to have you all on the panel tonight, and I'm really looking forward to jumping in. So without further ado, I would like to start tonight by asking a few general questions. I'm going to take a seat. If anyone has any trouble hearing me, please let me know. Usually I'm pretty loud. I've never been accused of being quiet, so. So I'd like to talk a little bit tonight, just start the conversation off about what each of your agencies do, because that was a real mouthful that I just gave, but for those who don't work in this field, it would be helpful to hear from you. So if we could start with you, James, could you just tell us a little bit about what your agency does and the role that you play in immigration in Massachusetts?
Yeah, of course. So I'm from Project Citizenship, and as the name implies, we help people apply for citizenship. I've been there for almost 2 years now. And also, as the name implies, we're very singularly focused on naturalization. In terms of numbers in 2022, we helped over 1,300 people successfully naturalize. So they completed an application, submitted it, and became citizens. And we screened over 2,500 people. So we deal in I think, a higher volume than you might expect, given our small staff. And we also run on a workshop model. So what that means is on at least like a weekly basis, we'll have a citizenship workshop where our clients will come in, they'll sit down with somebody and fill out an application. That usually takes about an hour. From there, they'll sit down with an attorney who's there volunteering to do more of like a quality control check. And then we will review all the applications after that and get whatever we still need and submit them from there. But yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Megan, could you tell us a little bit more about your agency as well?
Yes, absolutely. So the Justice Center is a subsidiary of South Coastal Counties Legal Services, which is the legal aid organization for the southeast region of Massachusetts, southeast Mass, including the Cape and the Islands. South Coastal, in general, provides free legal services for indigent clients who, in a variety of legal matters, housing, family, immigration is just one of those. I am an immigration attorney, housed at the Justice Center, and we serve the whole of the area in, as Amanda mentioned, primarily humanitarian-based immigration cases. To give you a basic idea of what that means, the highest volume of cases that we see are for something called special immigrant juvenile status, which is for children, people under 21 who have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by at least one parent and going to their home country to be reunited with that parent is not viable. We also see a high number of asylum cases, which folks apply for if they are afraid of returning to their home country, applications for victims of crime, of domestic violence, and human trafficking, a whole host of things. Like Project Citizenship, we also do a lot of community clinics for things as they arise, not so much for naturalization, but you might have heard of the recent redesignation of temporary protected status for Haitians. When things like that come up, we'll host clinics to get folks registered for TPS, and just general things that the community needs as they arise.
Great, thank you. No shortage of things going on at that agency, for sure.
Well, I think in the process of fairness, I think I'm going to let Dennis tell you
You'll do a very good job.
what the agency does, and then I'll just add what community relations.
Great.
Sometimes we're confused with other offices of DHS who are focused on immigration matters. When I joined the agency or joined government service, our agency was known as the Immigration and Naturalization Service. That existed for over 100 years. I think the 100th anniversary was in 1991, but in 2003, the Homeland Security Act dissolved USCIS, and it created an agency called U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And we have an agency called ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which includes interior enforcement operations and deportation and removal. That's a separate entity. And Customs and Border Protection, which works at airports, ports of entry, land borders, inspecting people for admission to the United States. USCIS focuses on services, adjudicating applications for benefits under the Immigration and Nationality Act. The two principal applications are applications for citizenship, applications for permanent residence. Of course, we do all sorts of applications, application to be classified for issuance of an immigrant visa based on family relationships, employment-based petitions. The applications, usually those applications are adjudicated at service centers. If there is interviews required, we in the field conduct the interviews. We are doing fewer interviews right now. We have a comprehensive immigration strategy where if we can adjudicate the application based on a review of the paper, we do that. We strive to do that. If an interview is required, people are called in for interviews. But I'm very happy to be with USCIS. Our mission before, I was the Deputy District Director with responsibility over enforcement and services. But as an immigration inspector, you learn the law very well and you understand those programs, but my heart is in adjudications. And earlier today, I was in Fall River for a naturalization ceremony aboard the USS Massachusetts, and 49 new citizens joined our family. So every time that happens, we become a stronger country. So naturalization ceremonies, and you'll hear federal judges say this, it's the best thing that they do as a judge, administering at a naturalization ceremony. So to present a candidate for naturalization is a true honor, and it's important for us to meet with community groups and to encourage people to take that step. The work that's being done here in terms of giving people the knowledge, the skills to succeed in the testing portion of the process, and there are the 648 waivers, of course, but that's vitally important. There's a huge need for that, of course, and I'm just delighted to be here tonight, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And for all of us who don't know all of the lingo, we'll try to explain it as we go along in case there's too many acronyms. There's so many acronyms in law, in education, so we'll try to break it down as we go along as well. Would you like to add anything, John?
Yeah, I think I would. Just briefly, when I go out, and my job is to go out to make presentations to provide information on the processes that USCIS uses to accept in applications and to process those applications and what that's all about. So if people have questions about how they go about doing it, where they can get assistance in doing it and not get scammed or be a subject of fraud in the process of doing that, it's my job to make them aware that fraud and deceit is out there, and there are people who are willing to take your money, and they're looking for vulnerable people to get that money. And my job is to point them in the direction of competent attorneys, immigration attorneys, and to the accredited representative program from the Department of Justice, which serves low-income clientele. And when I do that, I often go through the old INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, that was changed in 2003. And it was trifurcated, it was split in three components. And those three components are, as indicated, ICE, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol Protection, and USCIS. And the only one of those three agencies that has no authority to make arrests or to detain is USCIS. And that was purposeful on the part of Congress so that people would not be afraid to come in front of us. However, when I make that distinction, 2 minutes later I get a question that asks me about when was the last time I arrested somebody or whatnot. So it's very confusing to people, And particularly when you're dealing with people with multiple languages, it's sometimes difficult to get across. So it's a challenge, but I'm available and try to make myself as available as possible to any agency that is dealing with immigrants and trying to support their process of becoming part of the United States community and integrating into our community. So that's the short answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, and thank you for the distinction. So we've talked a little bit about what your agencies do with folks once they are here, but I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about how people come to the United States. And I think we all see lots of very troubling images on the news, and some people have misperceptions about how people actually arrive, why they come. So I thought that perhaps we could start this by backing up slightly and talking a little bit about an overview of the legal processes by which people come to the United States. Recognizing that there are certainly ways that are not within the legal process by which people arrive, but I think we'll stick to the legal process for this part of the conversation. So could we start, Meagan? I might direct this at you to begin. Based on your work, could you tell us a little bit about how people get here and what happens when they arrive?
Absolutely. So a lot of the people that I see that come through our office, they get here because they are running here. They are running from something, from someone. We see a lot of families and a lot of children presenting themselves at land borders. Southeast Massachusetts has a very high Central American population. We have a very high Haitian population. You know, the Northern Triangle, Haiti, many other countries that we see our clients coming from, you know, we all know, you know, something about the political situation there, something about how dangerous it is for people to be living there, for specific people to be living there. So when someone has taken their family, uprooted their lives, and decided that they need to leave, enter a different country, enter the United States, you know, when you're in that situation, normally you haven't applied for a visa before you left, either because it's not safe for you to do so, or the legal avenue is just not available to you. For a lot of folks, there is no line that you can get in to wait for a visa. There's certainly not a timely line to get in to wait for a visa. Folks have the right to present themselves at ports of entry in the United States. That is a lawful way to enter and claim, you know, tell Customs and Border Patrol, I am afraid to return to my country. And there is a legal process that happens from there. It often goes through the immigration court. I will not bore you with the details. It's a very long, drawn-out process. There's a way that's rolling out right now to try to initiate that process ahead of time through an app, it's called CBP1. It's a way to alert immigration that you're on your way, that you're coming, that you're intending to apply for asylum. There are some issues with the use, some issues with connectivity, and it working for different people and being available in certain languages, but we're getting there. There are also family-based petitions, folks with certain legal statuses, most notably folks with permanent residence, folks with citizenship can apply for certain family members, immediate family members, to come to the United States. Many of those family members are waiting in their home country for their visa to be processed, and then they'll be allowed entry. You might be seeing in the news that there is some rollout for some countries of parole programs where the government can invite certain individuals who have pending family-based petitions to wait in the United States because of the situation in their country, but that's by invitation only. There is a whole world of employment-based immigration that I know absolutely nothing about, but you can get here through an employer, and I think I got the major ones. Do you have anything to add, James?
That's it. One thing that's surprising, or it might surprise you, is that a lot of these classifications have no path to citizenship, right? So you could be a student coming to study at BU, say, and you have to go back when you're done. And I think that's one of the misconceptions.
So I'll just repeat that just so because I think that's a really compelling piece here, is that there are visas that you can be in the United States on that have no path to citizenship. And I just want to drive that home because I think it's something we hear a lot when we're talking about, are they going to become a citizen, or does that person want to be a citizen, or when will they become a citizen? And there aren't pathways for everyone here, and so I think that's a really important distinction. Is there anything, John or Dennis, that you'd like to add to that?
In certain circumstances, there are paths to permanent resident. If you're a student and you do the practical training and an employer is willing to file a petition for you, some people change their status from a student, which is an F1, to an H, a temporary worker of distinguished merit and ability. But in general, James is correct. But there are ways, and there are a number of non-immigrant visa categories that a person could change their status from one non-immigrant category to another. There are provisions for that.
Great, thank you so much for that clarity. So we're talking a bit about visas and permanent residency and citizenship, which, if you're not, again, working in this field, may seem like it's all sort of in the same soup. Could we talk a little bit about the distinction between a green card or permanent residency and citizenship, and what the differences there are for the people who have those distinctions? I'll really open this up to anyone. Maybe James, if you want to start, since...
Yeah. So if you take like a really zoomed out look at the path to citizenship, being a green card holder, being a permanent resident is like the step right before being a citizen. So if you have a green card, you're authorized to live in the United States indefinitely, work in the United States. However, there are some exceptions. So you can be deported. So if you commit certain crimes, say you commit a drug-related crime, those are typically serious enough that you could be deported, depending on the circumstances. You also can't participate civically like a citizen would, right? You're not able to go vote. And if you were to vote as a permanent resident, you would be permanently barred from citizenship, likely. So those are sort of the key differences. Did you want me to get into like the eligibility?
Sure,
as well?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So in terms of being eligible for citizenship, right, you need to be a green card holder. That's the first step. And most people will be permanent residents for 5 years. There is a rule, so if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can sort of take a shortcut, and it's only 3 years if you're living in marital union. But for most people, it's going to be 5 years. You have to be a person of good moral character, which can be sort of a broad thing. You have to be an adult, so you have to be 18. And let's see, am I missing anything else? That's pretty much it.
Residency.
The residency, yep. So, and this is a complicated part as well, right? So you have to, you can't abandon your status, right? So that's something that can happen to people that are permanent residents. They can leave the United States for a period that's considered too long, and it might be presumed that they've abandoned their status. So that can be tricky, and that's 180 days, six months. You can also abandon if you leave for more than a year, potentially. So that's stuff that isn't a problem when you're a citizen, but it's also stuff that you have to do to become a citizen, right? So you have to stay in the United States. You have to reside for 3 months in your current place. So that's a common thing that'll happen. People will they'll move here, say you move here from New York City. You have to live there for a period of time before you can apply, even though you just moved states. You were in the United States the whole time. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. And then you also have to pass a test. So most people will have to take the English and civics test. There's some ideas on changing some of the tests right now. Nothing official, but it is a test that most people have to take and pass. The exemptions are all based on either a medical waiver or based on your age. So some people, if you're a permanent resident long enough and you're old enough, you can just get through without having to take the test. So that's sort of a very broad overview of it.
I might ask one follow-up question, if you don't mind, and I know this might be sort of a range, but how long does this process take?
Good. So that's a good question, and I think it varies a lot. I think right now in Boston it's like 6.5 months. Just like 80% of cases will be done in that time. That seems pretty short for me. Like
from the submission of application.
Exactly. Yeah.
6.5 months. But how long does it take to get to be able to apply? Because
from the submission of James's application, it's that amount of months. It will widely vary. The time that a client arrives at my door to the time when they become a citizen can be massively disparate. If someone's applying for a U visa, which is a visa available to a victim of crime, it can be, what is it now, 20-something years?
Yeah.
Before
it makes
20 years?
Before they get to the point of even being able to apply for a green card. That is on the higher end of the spectrum.
Wow.
For special immigrant juveniles, the process is much faster, but even there, you're looking between, to get to the citizenship level, you're looking at 5 to 7 years, when processing times are very good, and those can vary also depending on the time, depending on CIS schedules and things like that. It is impossible to give a time frame somewhere between the 5 years that it takes to have your green card and the 20 years that it will take to make it there from a U visa. It's really going to depend on the process and the person.
So if I arrive from another country hoping to become a U.S. citizen, it could take anywhere from a few years to 20 years, potentially.
Depending on your
Yeah,
individual
most of the
circumstances.
time that you're referring to is to gain permanent residence.
Yes.
Once a person gains permanent residence, if the person is married to a U.S. citizen, the waiting time is 3 years as a permanent resident. If it's not a spousal unity relationship, it's 5 years to apply. Our processing time after someone applies is over 6 months. We're trying to get to 6 months. That's the goal. Adjustment of status, that was a requirement as well. Our Director Jadu, who's very progressive and wants us to be more efficient. The goal again was 6 months, but many of our officers are detailed to credible fear cases, people coming to the southwest border who say that, please, I need to remain here. I have reason to fear return for reasons under the law, political asylum, an asylee, there's a definition. A lot of our people are detailed to other assignments. So we're always trying to increase our staffing. Our staffing we have increased vacancies because people are going to other positions. We're in the field, we interview people. There's an attractiveness to remote work and to expanded telework, but right now our interviews, there are moves toward interviewing people virtually, but we haven't got to that place where it's going to make an impact. So, but we're hiring. We're hiring at a robust pace, but priority in terms of bringing people on goes to asylum and service centers. The greatest need is understood, and it's our priority is to address people who are arriving at our borders seeking safe haven.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to go back just to something that Meagan said, and she's right on the spot. But my intent is to put this in context because I don't know how much experience with immigration people sitting in the audience here have. So when we're talking about the U visa and the T visa, those two visas are really exceptional. They're sort of aside from the normal process of coming into the United States and gaining permanent residency and then possibility of citizenship in the United States. Those two programs were started by Congress in 2000 when, and it really came out of the Violence Against Women Act. And essentially the U visa is a visa for people who are here in the United States and by and large have arrived here with no documentation to be here. And they are in addition a victim of crimes, certain crimes that have been committed against them. And because of those circumstances and the vulnerability of those individuals, Congress determined that they were going to provide a special provision, the U visa, to try and accommodate those people who are willing, number one, to provide information against the individuals who are perpetrating crimes against them, so that the criminal justice system in the United States can go after those individuals and persecute them. And if that connection, if that agreement is made between the victim and law enforcement or an entity that qualifies as law enforcement under the law, then they earn the right to apply for a U visa to stay here in the United States, to be permitted to work here in the United States for a period of time, and it can ultimately lead to permanent residence for those individuals. I'm going to go to the T visa, and then I'm going to come back to both of them again. The T visa is different in that the T visa has to do with trafficking of human beings. and that's sexual trafficking of human beings and also an economic trafficking of human beings. So that means bringing people into the United States, seizing their documents, and having them work as farmers' hands in the field for no pay for months at a time, and you take what we're willing to give you, and they're being victimized. So those people are in the same circumstances, under the same type of connection with law enforcement, the willingness to provide information to prosecute the individuals that are perpetrating the crimes. They can receive a T visa. The key ingredient here is that when Congress created this act, it created the act limiting the number of visas available yearly to 10,000 for the U visa and 5,000 for the T visa. Over the years, there has been an oversubscription or an attempt to get those visas. So if you have 10,000 people applying in the first year and 15,000 applying in the second year, and they're all eligible, after 2 years you have 5,000 people who are awaiting a visa that doesn't yet exist until the following year. And year after year, it builds up. So 20 years, you may be talking about a long period of time now to obtain some of these visas because there's a limit to the visas. That's not because of the processing, that's because of the availability of the visas. And until Congress decides that they're going to change that in some way, that's where it is.
Well, that is the perfect segue to my next question, John. So thank you for bringing up Congress. So as we know, as everyone here knows, immigration as a topic has become extremely politicized in the United States. It's always actually been politicized in the United States. I'm a real history nerd myself, but I will say it is increasingly politicized, particularly thanks to social media. However, as we know, lots of things that are highly talked about actually are sometimes less impacted than we think by changing politics and politicians. I'm curious if you could share, and I think I'll start with you, Dennis, if you don't mind. How do politics around immigration affect or do not affect the actual immigration process? So when you see administrations changing or leaders changing, how does that actually affect the immigration process in the United States?
Boy, am I glad you got that one.
Can we turn the camera off for a while? No, I will talk about a story that, and Mayor DeSimone mentioned that policies change, administrations change, they have, there's a change in emphasis in terms of what work we will be doing, and where will our focus be. Certainly under the previous administration, there was not the demand for personnel to go to the southern border as there is today in terms of credible fear. But speaking about U visas, speaking about people not understanding that what our mission is in comparison to missions of other USCIS or DHS entities, maybe 2014-15, we learned that in Fall River, not Fall River, what's the other town? New Bedford. That there were people there that were afraid to come forward. There was a law enforcement operation some years ago at a factory. There was just no trust in immigration. And we also learned that people were being robbed by fellow citizens coming from their work at fish processing centers and women on the streets, assaults on women, but they wouldn't go to the police because they were afraid. So we went down and we spoke with the chief of police, who was a fine person, passed away since, spoke with the community organizations there, spoke with the people that serve the immigrant community and said, yes, people are afraid. So our first challenge was to get a venue where we could hold a meeting to talk about U visas and T visas. And several churches said no. Well, they consulted with their parishioners. We finally went to a church, St. Anthony of Padua in New Bedford, and the U.S. Attorney in Boston, Carmen Ortiz, agreed to come with us. The head of ICE agreed to come with us. And there was a concern expressed by someone in the law enforcement community, well, you're all coming down and you'll come in your SUVs and you'll punch a ticket and we won't see you again. And someone on our team said, we don't have SUVs, we have white minivans and only one. So we arrived down, well, the day we had people coming from the Vermont Service Center where the U and T visas are adjudicated. So we really pulled a fine team together. And the day we came, there was a terrible storm. And there were accidents on I-89 through Vermont into New Hampshire. So they turned around because there was the Vermont Service Center team turned around because of the backlog. And we spoke with the organizers and said there'll probably be very few people coming because of the weather. And we said, well, we have to come. We said we were going to be there. I called Carmen Ortiz and said, Carmen, we'll reschedule the event. We'll make it for a later time because we don't want you to come down and there's a handful of people. Well, we arrived and there was 150 people waiting. So the head of ICE at the time talked about the U visa, gave his perspective, said that enforcement, we are not interested, or his agency was not interested in arresting people for immigration violations or non-aggravated felon crimes. And he encouraged people to take advantage, to come in. We had made arrangements with the priest, the parish priest, Father Murphy, coming down and interviewing people for citizenship. And he made the point, not many of our parishioners or the people in the community are eligible to apply for citizenship because they're not permanent residents. And the point was stressed, this church provides vital services. We have a soup kitchen or a lunch service, and people who come here can't be afraid because black SUVs are parked here. And again, we said there'll be a white minivan, that's it. But we were building steam to make this happen. We had to get permission for a service that is called in mobile services. And we were also going to bring a crew of information officers down so people who could walk in, who didn't have status, could ask questions. And that's true in immigration offices today. You not need to go through the contact center now, but anyone who walks into our office, unless there's a warrant for an arrest, and that's usually a criminal matter or someone who's been ordered deported, there's no arrest that's going to happen in a USCIS office.
And so what I'm hearing is that the USCIS office, for all intents and purposes, functions as it should function regardless of the political
Not necessarily,
climate.
and that's the point, a long-winded, around the bend sort. Mobile services, the new administration decided that that's not something that's a good investment. Also, ICE priorities changed, so it affects how programs that we have. It doesn't affect the law unless Congress changes the law. You have executive action. The Obama administration, in terms of executive action, made programs available that weren't provided for under the law. We have to administer those programs. So we are public servants. Whatever administration is in office, in power, we respond to their policies, and that's our duty, and we do the best we can in carrying them out. So there is an impact on how we administer the law based on policies, executive action orders. It impacts us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarity. Would anyone like to add to that? How, in your work, or John, even in your specific role, how are you seeing politics swaying one way or another, affecting the work that you do or the work that you have to complete each day?
Sure. So I think everything that was just said is right on the money. Something to emphasize is that immigration, by and large, is a government entity. The process is run by the government. Even immigration courts are not judicial courts. They are under the executive branch of the government. Our elected officials are responsible for who sits on the court, how it functions. Our lawmakers are creating the laws that govern how the immigration process runs, the priorities of immigration law enforcement, of ICE, of the people who do have the power to arrest people, how they're doing that, who they're doing that to. That is all affected by politics. We once had a policy of child separation in this country. I've had a number of clients who are still coming to me and who are still in immigration court, because immigration court is a whole nother ballgame. It also drags out for different reasons, who are still telling me, when I arrived here, I told ICE, I told Customs and Border Patrol that I wanted to apply for asylum, that I was afraid to go home. I then could not focus on my interview. I don't think I did a very good job on my interview, because they took my 2-year-old daughter away from me, and I didn't know where she was for weeks, for months, for however long. Parents were being deported without their children, and we've been talking about the breaking of trust. There's nothing that's going to break trust more than a policy like that, and that's coming directly out of the political sphere. Who we elect, how we interact with our elected representatives, and what we tell them about how we want our immigration process to function, it very much matters.
Thank you for adding that. Anything you wanted to add, James, before we move on?
Yeah, so I think I would say, from my perspective in dealing with citizenship, it's sort of limited, I guess, when it comes to these topics, just because I think the juicy, politicized topics tend to be on the other end of the process. But one thing I think that has touched our work at Project Citizenship is the medical waivers we do. So
I'm sorry, can you just say the
medical waivers?
Medical waivers.
Yeah, so these are waivers for people that because of one or more medical conditions wouldn't be able to learn English and civics enough to pass the test. And so in this process, you have your doctor fill out a form. This form is sent in with your application for citizenship, and then it's adjudicated at the interview. So a lot of the interviews I go to are for these forms specifically. When I first started, it was right after Biden took office, and the N648 form we were working with was like 9 pages. It was very difficult to get a sufficient form from a doctor. And about a year into me Project Citizenship, the form was shortened to 5 pages. So it was shortened from 9 to 5 pages. And I promise you, those pages did not make it easier to get approved. So I think that's like a real way in which like these politicized topics impact citizenship.
Thank you so much for adding that. Yes, John.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one point about politics. And looking around the room and all the young people in this room, I'd like to tell you that the older you get, the more you tend to ruminate. So my rumination is that I keep politics out of what I do for the agency. So when I'm coming in and I'm providing information as it is right now, because people are asking, what do I have to go through when I apply for this application or that application? And I need to give them real-time information about what's current. That having been said, I could be really the single most G-man in this room because I've been working for the government for 50 years in one way or another. And I've taken an oath of allegiance all the way along the way. And the oath of allegiance is, in my view, non-political and non-equivocal. You're either ethical and following the Constitution and the oath that you took, or you're not, period. So that having been said, my job is to provide you the information on what you need to go through now to apply for the benefit. And the obligation of USCIS is to take a look at what the eligibility requirements are for that benefit and make a fair determination whether you meet the requirements or not. And your personal situation has nothing to do with it. I don't care if you're not being taken care of here or there or someplace else. Do you meet the requirements by law or do you not? And that's the obligation of an officer at USCIS, is to make that determination and to do it fairly.
Thank you so much. So I want to be mindful of time so that folks have a little bit of time at the end here to ask you all some questions. For my next question, I'm going to ask you to try to answer in one sentence, if possible. So we've already answered a lot of this tonight, so hopefully there might not be any surprises here, but I'm curious what some of the most common misconceptions you hear about immigration are, either from immigrants themselves or from others in the community. And again, 1 or 2 sentences, but just what is that big misconception you hear or that comes up again and again? Anyone can start if you want. Whoever has that right there for them.
Immigrants are takers, and I know that they are givers.
I don't know that I'd put it in terms of misconceptions. I think my general comment would be, I think migration is the issue of our period.
That there is a right way to get here available to everyone, and if someone just waited their turn, then all of our problems would be fixed.
I agree with all of these. I'm going to give a more practical one, I think, for citizenship. You can apply with an expired green card. That doesn't matter. There's so many people that call. We get a million emails and calls every day about people worrying about their green card expiring. But you're not losing status when your green card expires. It could matter for other things, but not for applying for citizenship.
Thank you. Those are all incredibly important. And Dennis's really resonates with the work that we do at the Literacy Center, which is that we too believe immigrants are givers. Coming to the end of my questions here, there is a migrant crisis going on in Massachusetts right now, as we started tonight talking a little bit about. I'm wondering how your agencies individually are responding to this crisis, and what do you think the most pressing issues at hand during this crisis are?
Our job hasn't changed. We administer the Immigration and Nationality Act to the best of our ability, administering it in a fair and just way. That remains the same.
One of my primary jobs, I think, is to work with resettlement agencies throughout the state of Massachusetts and also in the Northeast. And so I attend their quarterly meetings, and I'm there to do really 2 things. Is sometimes I get questions about this or that that'll come up in regard to immigration. And the other job that I have there is to keep my ears open and to listen to what challenges the people who are dealing with the immigrants actually real time are running into in the field. And sometimes I can pick up something that might be a problem within USCIS, and I can forward that information up through region and to headquarters so that we're alert to it if we weren't alert to it before, and can rectify the problem if it happens to be our problem. So I have a two-tier role there.
In terms of the state of emergency in Massachusetts specifically, a big part of what we're hearing about is that there's a large number of families being housed in emergency shelter, and that those shelters are underfunded and overflowing. And a large population of those shelters are housed by recent arrivals, by migrants. A big problem that those families, those migrants are facing is that nobody has work cards when they first arrive. Nobody has the authorization to work, and you can't get authorization to work without some sort of pending application, at least for immigration status. There is state funding that's been very recently made available. It's the Migrant Relief Fund, I think it's called. And our organization and a lot of other legal aid organizations in the state are involved in being in the shelters, in consulting with families, with individuals, specifically to figure out where their case is legally, what options they might have, and how we can get work authorization for individuals, because they all would like to work, and most of them do not have the ability as quickly as possible, because nobody wants to remain in shelter.
Yeah, and I think our organization, we're in a bit of a unique spot, like I said before, just because we're on the other end of the process. But we do get calls and emails every day, and people stopping by that are in all sorts of all ends of the spectrum, I guess you could say. Looking to get a green card, looking to help apply for their friend or family member. And so I think one thing we focus on, we only can help with citizenship, right? But we can focus on being sort of the best guiding beacon that we can be and point them in the right direction. And so we typically do give these people a list of all the local organizations. We do a little bit of diagnosing what they're looking for, so we can send them to the right organization. If we hear that one organization is slowing down because they have too much right now, maybe we'll push another organization. And also just keeping our ear to the ground as well, with all the different community organizations we work with.
Thank you. Well, and thank you all for the roles that you're playing there. Meagan just touched on this, and I'm curious if we could talk a little bit, just expand on it a little bit about work authorization. So it seems to be separate from visas or paired with them. I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about how folks can or cannot work when they come to the United States. Particularly because we do see and have been hearing at the Literacy Center and lots of other social service providers that there's this real, true issue of folks not being able to work, to support themselves, to get out of shelters, to take care of their families, and to settle in communities. So I'm curious what that process is and how it's being addressed, and anyone can jump in here.
Sure. So again, and this is a very lawyer answer that I keep giving, but it varies, it depends. Some folks, when they enter, if they interacted with immigration at the border, some folks have been what's called paroled in, which means that immigration, for whatever reason, decided to give them the ability to apply for work authorization for a period of 1 year, essentially right off the bat. So they would be able to, based off of that parole, apply for a work permit on the basis of that very temporary status. It will only get them through the year in most cases. They can apply to renew it. We haven't really been seeing them be renewed. And they'll want to get into another form of status if they can. Whether or not they have parole, they're going to want to look to see if there's anything else they can apply for, because there's no way I can think of that you can get work authorization without immigration status. We've been talking a lot about asylum up here. If you submit an application for asylum, a certain amount of time goes by, and you are then eligible to apply for a work permit on the basis of that pending application. And then if you win your asylum case, then you have permanent ability to work. All permanent residents have, your green card is your work authorization. A lot of the folks in shelter are eligible for TPS, or were eligible for TPS. That's temporary protected status. That comes with work authorization once approved. There's always a wait time when you submit an application. It's going to take any agency, any court, a certain amount of time to be able to look at it, to adjudicate it, and to issue the work permit. But hopefully, when we meet with somebody, we're hoping to find some way to get them to the work authorization, and the time that it will take to do that varies.
Anything you'd like to add?
Right, John?
Yeah, I can. I don't think you're talking about a simple issue here. I think there is a requirement that in order to be able to be authorized to work here in the United States, you must meet the requirements of law to be able to do so. So you must be properly admitted in one form or another with an opportunity to be able to be employed. So, for example, if a family member applies for another family member to come to the United States, immediately family member to come as a permanent resident to the United States, when they arrive in the United States, when the visa is available and they come here, they are automatically permanent residents of the United States and entitled to work in the United States. Other people come here for work, and they come on a visa that allows them to work in the United States, but they are they're limited in the amount of time that they can stay here unless they take another step, and the employer takes another step to see that they continue their employment. Other people, as you say, arrive at the border and they're paroled in, and they're authorized under the statute of law to get a work document and to be able to be employed. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with that because depending upon the status upon which you were entered into the United States, and that's the responsibility of Customs and Border Protection as to whether you're eligible to come into the United States, whether you're admissible, whether they will allow you to enter without admission under a certain status, and whether that status grants you the authority to apply for an employment document. Sometimes that application process can take months or maybe even a year. 6 months is not unusual. 9 months is not really unusual. Now, what's happening with the influx from the border, what they're trying to do is they're trying to cut back the amount of time that it takes for individuals to receive that work document, because there's so many people here in the United States that are flooding the states. And I'm going to leave it up to the individuals in the audience and what they see on the news and what they absorb on the news. And I'm hoping you're looking at real news and not fake news. And when people come into the United States and they arrive here in the United States and they're on the southern border and they get shipped up to Martha's Vineyard to make a point. And whatever you think of that process, and I'm open to any interpretation of it, but it does open the eyes of people who haven't gone through that experience before, and I'm talking about the Northeast. So what's happening in Massachusetts and in New York right now is very instructional. I would suggest that you pay attention to it, because what's happening is there's an awful lot of people who are entering those states, New York and Massachusetts, that are being housed by the state of Massachusetts. And it's not the state of Massachusetts is pulling the full weight on that. There are individual groups that are not resettlement agencies, that are churches, private groups, individuals that are providing support to those people, Pampers for the kids, ethnic food for the people who are arriving here and are not used to the food here in the United States. They're being housed in motels and hotels across the state. And then you look at Mass and Cass, and I know there's the drug issue that's down there, but we've got homeless here in the United States as well that don't have places to live, that we have no places to put them in. So what's really happening here, and what's the answer for it? And it's a very, very large question. And it goes way beyond the employment document. And the employment document is key because it allows people to prepare to provide for their own families and for themselves. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great point.
Regarding the employment document, our director, Jadu, has called on the field in other parts of USCIS to contribute to an effort to reduce the backlog. So in our district, we have 9 field offices. 4 officers are detailed to that project from Boston and 4 from Hartford. And that's going on throughout the country. So there is an effort to reduce the backlog, especially for those people who arrive at the southwest border, southern border. So there will be improvement.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, and I'm very happy to hear that, Dennis, because of course we know that there's this parallel challenge going on of a labor shortage throughout the state of Massachusetts in certain fields and sectors, and so one would imagine that there could be some synergy here between getting folks who want to work the opportunities to do so to help meet the needs throughout the state. I just want to have one kind of closing question here. We offered an opportunity on the RSVP form for tonight for folks to ask questions, and something that came up over and over again when folks did submit questions was, what can we do to help, recognizing that we don't work in the field of immigration, but immigration is a very complex and a very lengthy process, and there are so many different pieces to this puzzle. I think people often feel like they just don't know enough or have no ability to do anything about this. So I'm curious what your thoughts might be on what the average person can do to help the immigrant community or help your agencies during this time of increased need in the state.
Well, to start, I've got a website for you. If you go to mass.gov/shelter-crisis, this is recently released by the state. There are very concrete steps that you can take if you want to help. There's a number that you can call, an email that you can send to saying what you want to do to help. There are shelters that are calling for, basic human needs. It's a lot of children's stuff, diapers, strollers, and anything you would tend to think about when you think of like clothing drives, food drives, that kind of thing. There's always a need for financial assistance. There are funds. There's the migrant relief fund that I mentioned earlier, that is also linked on that web page. And you can contact folks who are dealing with this directly and say, I want to help. Either what can I do to help? What's the most need? Or I want to help financially. Who should I donate to? I want to send some things. I want to run a drive to a specific shelter or to whoever needs it. How do I do that? I think that would be a really great first step to anybody looking to help. Aside from that, if you're looking to help just, the immigrant community in general, we work with a lot of community organizations that provide, financial funding to, folks who are migrants who are struggling financially, who, are hitting hard times. There are funds out in the community to help those individuals. There's one big problem in immigration is physically getting where you need to go, because if you are an undocumented individual, you can't drive, you haven't been able to drive until very recently in Massachusetts. Now you can get a driver's license, and that helps. But there's also the issue of affording a car. And if you miss a biometrics appointment with these fine gentlemen's agency, that can slow your process. That can derail your process. If you miss a court hearing, you can be ordered removed. There are community organizations that are dedicated to, just giving people rides. And the one that comes to mind that our office works on is called Beyond, BIJAN. You should be able to Google that pretty quickly if you want to get involved with them. And there are plenty of others out there that are easily accessible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I'm also going to throw up site projectcitizenship.org. We were always looking for volunteers for our workshops, and we do need attorney volunteers, but we also need many volunteers. No, required skills, I guess you could say. We have an hour-long training that you can watch, and then you can go right in and sit down with an applicant and fill out their application with them. And it's a really rewarding experience. Somebody's telling you their whole life for about an hour. And it's awesome. We also are always looking for interpreters. So if you're bilingual, multilingual, let me know. And
Call us too.
Yeah, no, me first. But yeah, so. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Anything, Dennis or John, you'd like to add?
Looking at the back of the room, Dan Gives, who was an immigration officer with USCIS for a number of years. He is a volunteer here. Dan was a great officer, but more importantly, he is a great human being. Walking in tonight, the naturalization ceremony that I mentioned in Fall River, we go to Fall River, we go to New Bedford. I think if we were to hold naturalization ceremonies in other parts of the states, telling the immigration story, what new citizens mean for our country, I think that is something that we want to do more of. So I don't know if there's a room in the library, but it would be great to have a naturalization ceremony here. And graduates of your program, if they were prepared, they would be part of the ceremony. I think we need to do that because it sends a message, and it's moving to people who just happen to walk in and see a naturalization ceremony. The immigration story is real. In terms of what all of you can do, I can't offer any better advice than the advice you've heard already. I wish we could recruit all of you to come to work and fill our vacancies, but there's a process, and right now we're recruiting actively. So if you're interested, no matter how old you are, what's your background, there are employment opportunities with USCIS, and encourage your friends and your neighbors and contemplate it yourself. We want people who care, are dedicated to the mission, our mission, and we welcome your interest. And we haven't done a lot of recruiting in person. We're going to get back to that, but we want people from all walks of life. And we want people that reflect the communities that we serve. So that's our goal.
Thank you. And did you want to add anything? I'm also going to take some questions.
Yeah, I do, and I'll keep it brief, or I'll try to. When I first came on as community relations officer, I began working with resettlement agencies and getting to know them because they're a big stakeholder in the field and they deal with immigration issues. And a large number of times they're providing assistance to immigrants who otherwise can't afford to get the assistance unless they go to either resettlement agencies or accredited representatives, which oftentimes are the same entities. And when I first started out, one of the state resettlement coordinators made the comment that the resettlement agencies are extremely resilient, that they have seen them in political times in the past where they have been reduced in size, and then another administration came in and they've grown in size, and they've been able to sort of go back and forth with amazing rapidity and with competence. And I understood that. It made sense to me. But I didn't really completely understand it until the last couple of administrations and what has happened during that period of time, when the number of refugees coming into the United States went from 80,000 a year down to 16,000 a year, and people in the resettlement agencies had to go elsewhere because they didn't have sufficient money coming in to be able to pay. And many of those people were themselves refugees at one point in time, and when they moved on to another location, it was not easy to come back. You can't go backwards. So growing those agencies again to deal with the number of people who are now entering the United States, not so much as refugees, because the refugees are less than 40,000 this year or 44,000 this year so far. The cap is 125. That's what the intended purpose, but there's so many people coming in on parole that are now being serviced. You have Ukrainians coming in, you have the Afghans, and you have other programs that are coming in, the parole programs. So there are more people than 125,000 coming into the United States that these agencies are supporting. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is these agencies are agencies that would welcome your support. And they're in your own communities. And my suggestion to you is, you're looking for someplace to find out what you can do, contact them and ask them what you can do, or donate to them, or participate in some of their festivals and whatnot. And that's a way to support the entire program from the base up. And that's where it is essential that the support be provided.
Thank you so much. Well, that was really wonderful. I'm glad we took the time to talk about that. And I'll use this opportunity as a plug as well. If you want to help in our community, the Literacy Center predominantly provides English for speakers of other languages, which we haven't talked a lot about tonight on tonight's panel, but we really see that as a pathway to work as well. It can be very, very challenging if you don't speak English to get a job. And so we really hope to be partnering with these wonderful agencies that you see here, and we continue to partner with them to make sure that for folks who are in that process to be able to get work permits, in the process to get visas, to get their citizenship, that we are also working with them every step of the way. As Dennis mentioned, our board president, Dan, is here tonight. He's a former USCIS agent himself. He teaches our U.S. citizenship exam preparation class at the Literacy Center. And we also provide wraparound services to our immigrant community. So there's always opportunities, if you're right here in Attleboro, to work with us as well. On everyone's chair, all of the websites and contact information for all of these agencies are available to you. So I do encourage you to get in touch with these agencies and these folks if you have questions or thoughts about ways to be involved, because I'm sure they would value your input. So I want to use the last 15 minutes, I'm sorry I kind of cut us close here, to take a few questions, and then I'm sure our panelists will stick around and chat if they have a few extra minutes before they head off to everywhere they have to go. So yes, let's get right started, please.
I have a question about work permits. I agree with everything you said, but what is the criteria that, and is there a fast track? Like you say, work permits to me seem to be at least the beginning of helping people keep moving. What is the criteria? Like, if I came in on the southern border, what would be the criteria for me to get a work permit?
You would need to be eligible for some sort of admission or some sort of immigration status. So you can't just get a work permit in isolation. Almost always we have to submit some sort of immigration application to the court or to USCIS. in order for that person to become eligible for a work permit. So that's the criteria. So the eligibility is going to be different depending on what makes them eligible for immigration status in the first place.
So if you come in, and again, I'm talking out of my hat here, so excuse me, you correct me. If you come in and you're allowed to go to, into the state of Texas, and then they send you up here, but you haven't filled out this application, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in that? There is no way that the state or whatever can give you a fast track to do. I mean, what would be, you guys can't do anything about this, but what would be the harm in letting people work when they really want to work? And then fill out the friggin' application.
I would argue that there is no harm. I would love for there to be a fast track.
John's ready to respond to that as well, I think.
Yeah, again, I'm, you know, that's.
All right.
Yes.
Go ahead, John.
No,
We're bound to follow the law, regulations.
why, but-
Yeah, in reality, many people work in the United States without a work permit, but we can't endorse that. There's a process. In general, applications are adjudicated in order of receipt, but the backlog for employment authorization documents is very high. But we're working, again, the directors said we're going to put more resources at it. It was a service center operations responsibility. Now they have called our agency, Citizenship and Immigration Services, the Field Operations Directorate. So we are involved in it. So they have expanded the pool of officers to adjudicate those cases, and I believe in time, in the near future, we'll see improvement in the processing time. But people have to apply. There has to be a basis. It's ACFR 274. That's employment authorization in the United States. Who requires it? Who has authorization incidental to their status, their non-immigrant status, which wouldn't even require a person to apply for an EAD card. We need to do better.
I have no hang-ups with the work that you guys do. You work fantastic. My question is there any, I'll use the term lobbying, I don't even know what, to get some of these laws changed where you could fast track?
I think the state of Massachusetts, I think the governor is looking at ways and is encouraging my agency to do better. They have ideas. We'll have to wait and see how that turns out.
I can add to that as well that there are several groups that do that exact work. They do a lot of lobbying and advocacy to press these issues forward. One of them is the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. They're called MIRA. The Literacy Center is a member of MIRA. And so there are agencies doing that work. In fact, as Meagan mentioned, just recently, the MIRA and other partners were very instrumental in getting driver's licenses permitted for undocumented individuals. So there's work being done, and that advocacy is being done. And as Dennis said, I think the governor's office is pushing forward as well.
Thank you.
Yes, Roberta.
Something that hasn't been addressed, and I'm curious. What is the average cost for an immigrant to get a to get a green card?
The cost of an immigrant to get a green
I
card.
think I'm going to have to give you a rough off the top of my head. I don't know specifically. It's been a while since I've taken a look at it, but I'd say it's around $1,200.
$1,200 in the ballpark of.
I guess I do know of a person who has been in this country for, say, a year, and she's married an American, and she was told it's going to be like thousands of dollars.
Was that the price quoted by an attorney? Attorneys do charge thousands upon thousands of dollars to represent folks.
Yes.
She said it could be, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or more than that, and I actually Googled it earlier today just to see what's going on, and I saw I think it was maybe 1,700 if somebody's married an American, but that's what the government, like for the form, it's the So you're saying the lawyer's fee would be.
Private is, so my office, I've never charged anybody for a fee, so I can't really give an estimate in terms of what they do charge, but I have heard pretty high prices from lawyers who do charge money for it, and there's different reasons for that. Lawyers charge by the hour. So it sounds like maybe they're talking about attorney's fees without knowing who this individual is. You know, there are, depending on their financial situation, any individual's financial situation, legal aid does do some amount of family-based immigration. So if somebody's in financial straps and wants to do a marriage-based visa, they can contact to see if they're eligible for free legal services with an office like ours. Also, this wouldn't apply for family-based immigration, but a lot of the clients that I take on, they're doing humanitarian-based immigration processes, and they are oftentimes eligible for fee waivers based on their financial situation. So if somebody cannot afford to submit their immigration application for many immigration applications, there's an ability to apply for a fee waiver so that they don't have to take on that burden.
Yeah, I would say it's not uncommon for the folks that we've worked with at the Literacy Center to tell us they've spent $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on the process to go through the immigration process with an attorney. We hear that all the time.
I'm not surprised.
That's hard to imagine. About scams that are out there. That's so hard for, you know, for our students or the Literacy Center and also just immigrants in general to know which lawyers are going to really, you know, do what they say they're going to do for them and which aren't.
And whether they need an attorney or not, I think that's always a question as well.
Yeah, we're precluded from directing people to an attorney, a particular attorney, or saying you need an attorney. It's strange for me when people come to the counter that we cannot give immigration advice based on the specifics of a case. But in terms of the fee for the 485 and the I-130, if I can get this opened here, an I-130 is a petition to classify a person for an immigrant visa. It's usually filed most commonly by a U.S. citizen for a spouse, a parent, a brother or sister, and that application with the adjustment of status. So the adjustment of status is an I-45. That's like an immigrant visa, where if you're applying from overseas, you'd go to an embassy, a consulate, and you would be issued an immigrant visa. The immigrant visa in the United States is the 45, adjustment of status. And John was really on the mark in the cost. The fee charge with the fee is $1,140, and there's a biometric fee, which is fingerprints, and that's $85. We are a fee-based agency. We don't receive appropriated funds for our work in the field. It's all our funding is based on application fees. There's a proposal to increase those fees. I don't know the timetable for that, but questions. There are so many organizations that Project Citizenship that are reasonable and know the fee waiver process and want to help. And they're not for profit, but they're for the public good. And Catholic Charities, HIAS, so many organizations, Lutheran Social Services, so many organizations exist that want to help people. And it's the public good that is their motivation.
Didn't the fees just double in June?
No,
They didn't, yeah?
they didn't.
One more question here.
I know we're calling it a crisis in Massachusetts, and as it sounds like it's happening in other states as well.
May I ask you to stand just because you're behind the wall there and people might not hear you in the room, if you don't mind?
We're calling it a crisis in Massachusetts, and I assume it's happening in other states as well. Why, how are states preparing for this? How come we don't know who's coming? Like, or do we know who's coming? And how is that effort being, it seems like if we knew who was coming, it might be easier to prepare for them. And I assume that's the case in other states as well. And, I know we heard about, it made the news there, the Martha's Vineyard, and that seemed, I don't know if that was the first time it happened, or if this is just how people arrive here. How do people have choices in where they go? That's always been a question of mine.
I can speak on Martha's Vineyard. Our office was on the ground for the Martha's Vineyard. That was unprecedented in terms of recent times. Martha's Vineyard had no idea that those folks were coming. It was said before up here, it was done to make a point. They were dropped without warning, and it was left to, organizations and private individuals to get those folks where they needed to go and get them situated, and they were eventually, but that does happen.
Is that what's still happening here?
Yeah, so I will add, and I'm sure these folks have things they may add as well. In my understanding, after attending, I just recently attended a MIRA coalition who I just spoke about, a presentation by them, and they made a very important point, which is that there really isn't any way to know who is coming or to track it. People are not signing up in advance to come to the United States. Because there is no, and I think Meagan made this point very well before, there really isn't a way to do that. It's not because they're trying to get out of something or get around something. In many cases, it is not clear or there is no path for them to follow a system by which they can come here. And because they are legally allowed to come here and get off of a plane and seek asylum. So that's a legal process in the United States. So there's no way to know and who's arriving or to prepare necessarily. Now, we do know that when there are conflicts in the world, we see trends with migrants arriving from those conflict areas. So it's not necessarily surprising that with Haiti's president being assassinated 2 years ago and the entire country falling into a state of rampant crime, kidnapping, and violence, and a broken healthcare infrastructure, that we are now seeing families with children and pregnant women fleeing en masse from the country. Another thing that's really important to note is that there isn't a centralized tracking system. So once people do arrive and apply for asylum, we have a general sense of how many folks are here, but it is not always fully tracked because there are so many different pathways by which people arrive and come. So if it was and I think we didn't make this distinction fully, but John mentioned it a little bit. If they were part of a refugee program, it is different. But these are folks who are getting on airplanes or fleeing across a border, again, through the legal pathway of being allowed to do so, but there isn't necessarily a way to sign up in advance. Meagan did speak about an app that's being developed that would hopefully start processes for some folks in their countries of origin. But I don't think that's been.
There are a number of issues with
it, and I don't think it's actually happening yet. But that is also why it's such a moving target.
I may have been unclear. I meant it sounds like people are coming from the southern border and being relocated. Is that happening without advance notice to the states that they're going to?
I'm not sure if John or Dennis want to add. That's not my understanding. It's not a formal government relocation process.
Yeah, that is separate and apart from our work. We don't have any standing in those activities.
Again, in situations of refugee placement, there are cities selected and folks are moved based on a refugee placement. And that's a whole process that's set up in advance. But in this case, Massachusetts is a place where there is already an existing Central American and Haitian population, and a lot of migrants come because they know people here, because they're being sponsored by someone here, or because it's a safe place to go and it's a good state to go to, so they get here any way that they can. It is 7:30. If there's one more pressing question, I'll take it. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up for the evening. Anyone else had anything they wanted to add? Well, thank you so much. I want to give a big round of applause to our panelists tonight. I will say on your way out, there are flyers and information available, more about the Literacy Center, more about the work we are doing. This is an evolving situation. It will continue to change. Please do feel free to contact me, contact any member of the Literacy Center or any of these individuals on the pieces of paper on your chairs. We'd be happy to answer further questions or provide opportunities for you to help. But until then, thank you for your interest tonight. Thank you for your support of the Literacy Center. And if you have the ability to give, we would so appreciate your donations. There are signs in each corner of the room. You can make a donation to the Literacy Center and to our work to help support programs for immigrants in our community. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.